Welcome back to another episode of Grace, Grit, and Grounds. I'm glad you're here. Whether you're listening in the truck or sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, or even hiding in the garage for 5 minutes of peace, maybe just trying to catch your breath in the middle of a long week, I'm grateful you took time to be here with me. This space has always been about more than wood turning. It's about slowing down long enough to think, about finding purpose in the work, about grace for the places we've failed, grit for the road still ahead, and those quiet moments where life makes a little more sense with coffee in your hand and some sawdust on the floor. Today I've got a beautiful piece of walnut on the lathe, and while we work through that, I want to talk about something I think most of us wrestle with, even if we don't say it out loud. I want to talk about time. More specifically, I want to talk about the dangerous little question that sneaks into our minds when the world gets quiet. What if? What if I had chosen differently? What if I had taken the chance? What if I had said yes? Or maybe no? What if I could turn back time? That question has a way of showing up when you least expect it. While this bowl takes shape, maybe we can sit with that question together for a little while. There are some pieces of wood that announce themselves the moment you see them. This piece of walnut had been sitting in the shop for a little while. Every time I walked past it, I kept turning my eyes towards it, not because it was dramatic, not because it was damaged or that I felt like it would be a challenge. Honestly, just the opposite. There was nothing wrong with it. It was completely healthy. It was solid. It was clean. It had some strong grain in it and no obvious cracks. There was no hidden punky spots, no ugly surprises waiting at the edge. Just a beautiful piece of walnut with that deep, rich, dark heartwood and one thick band of pale sapwood running along one edge. Like somebody painted light right across the edge of it. And right there, in that transition where the dark meets the light, walnut does the thing that I love the most. That soft, almost feathering, where the line is blurred between the light and the dark, where one gives way to the other. It looks almost like smoke moving through the grain. It was about 7 or 8 inches across, and I knew I could probably pull about a 6-inch bowl out of it, maybe a little more if the wood cooperated, and I didn't do anything too stupid, which, let's be honest, is never guaranteed. Originally, I thought I wanted to leave a little curl on the rim, something with a bit of a lip, maybe even a little personality. But wood has a way of arguing with your plans. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it just smacks you in the face. This one just whispered. As I started turning it, it became obvious that this wasn't supposed to be that kind of bowl. It wanted to be open, maybe wider, a little more shallow, a little more simple. Less of a bowl, more of like a blessing bowl, maybe I would call it. Something that could hold keys, maybe some prayers, maybe a little grief or candy, or maybe just nothing at all. Sometimes the purpose gets decided later. Sometimes that's true for wood. Sometimes that's true for people. And while I was working on this piece, there was something else turning over in my mind. As I mentioned before, time is one of those things that constantly moves and we are caught up in it. And so I pondered time. Specifically, as I mentioned, that dangerous little phrase that we all wrestle with. What if? What if I had said yes? I think about that a lot. I think about a lot of those yeses that could have been when I was younger. There have been many of those where I said yes and I should have said no. Sometimes I ask myself, what if I had gone on that date? What if I had reached out to that young girl? What if I hadn't walked away? What if I had taken that job? What if I had started that business? What if I'd stayed with that company? What would have happened if I had left before I did? What if I'd chosen another road? Most of us don't live there all the time. At least I hope not. Because if you do, honestly, that sounds exhausting, and you should probably get some better hobbies. But there are days when the house gets quiet, days when the drive home feels longer than it should, days when your mind starts walking old roads with old ghosts, and suddenly you're standing in the middle of your own life, asking if one different decision would have changed everything. I know that feeling well. I think most of us do, and we may not say it out loud, but it's there. So when I mounted this walnut on the worm screw and started shaping the outside, there's something almost therapeutic about roughing out a bowl. My first cuts are aggressive. I'm not yet chasing beauty. I'm just trying to get it into shape. I'm trying to establish that form, remove what doesn't belong, because most of life is not elegant. Most of life is those rough cuts. It's God shaping us, and when He's doing that, it doesn't usually feel poetic. Mostly it feels inconvenient. It feels like loss. It feels like waiting. It feels like the plans you had were getting shaved off into long ribbons and dropped onto the floor, and we, standing there, are just wondering why. But this wood, like many others, teaches patience. This bowl honestly existed long before I ever touched it. Before it was in my shop, it was a board. Before it was a board, it was part of a tree. Before it was a tree, it was a seed buried in the dirt where nobody applauded. It had storms before it had grain. It had winter before it had beauty. It had years nobody noticed before it became something worth holding in your hands. Ecclesiastes says, He has made everything beautiful in its time. Not my time, but His time. That's the part I usually dislike the most, because I would prefer God to work on my schedule. And if He could coordinate that around lunch, maybe without any mild inconveniences, I would appreciate it. At least that's how I think sometimes. But that's not how formation works. And here's where the what if starts to creep in. Because if you hold a finished bowl, it's easy to imagine all the ways it could have gone wrong. If this tree had grown differently, if a limb had twisted the wrong way, if disease had set in at the wrong time, if someone hunting years ago had missed the deer and a bullet was buried deep into this trunk. And honestly, that happens more than you think. Nothing gets your attention quite like finding a redneck archaeology at 1,200 RPM. One hidden piece of metal could ruin tools, ruin wood, ruin your afternoon, and probably your sanctification. The truth is, if certain things had happened, this bowl would not exist the way it does now. And that thought mirrors life. Because I know this. If I had made different decisions years ago, I would not be the same man I am today. Some of that sounds exciting. Some of it sounds terrifying. Because sure, maybe another road would have made some things easier. Maybe there would have been less pain. Maybe less regret. Maybe even less failure. But maybe also less wisdom, less humility, less grace, less dependence on God. One of my favorite passages is found in Romans chapter 8, verse 28. We know that all things work together for good, for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. But Paul wasn't writing that from a beach chair with lemonade in his hand. He wrote it while knowing true suffering. He wrote it while knowing loss. He wrote it knowing unanswered questions abounded. The verse doesn't say that all things are good. It says God works through all things. Even the things I wish I could edit. Even the chapters I would gladly delete. Even the conversations I replay over and over again in the shower, like some tragic, low-budget theater production. Especially those. Once the outside shape felt right, I had the opportunity to reverse the bowl and started working on the inside. Normally, I use the Forstner bits to speed up the hollowing process. It's really efficient and it saves time, and it gets me to the finish line faster. But for some reason, this time, I didn't want to do that. I left the Forstner bits on the bench, and instead I just used the gouge. I went slow. Partly because I wanted the challenge, mostly because I needed the time. I was in one of those moods. You know the kind. Not angry, not sad exactly, just full. Thoughts had stacked on thoughts and questions without neat answers. Old memories walking around like they still pay rent. And sometimes you don't need speed. Sometimes you need process. Sometimes you need to let your hands work while your heart catches up. That extra time at the lathe mattered. Every slow pass of the gouge, every curl of walnut falling away, every adjustment or correction, because healing is rarely efficient. Reflection is rarely fast. And wisdom almost never arrives on time. Psalm 46 says, "Be still and know that I am God." That verse sounds peaceful. We've talked about it before. It even sounds like it should be framed and placed on a wall. In real life, though, stillness can feel brutal. Because stillness makes you hear things. It makes you hear fear, regret, grief, and the dreaded what if. But if you stay there long enough beneath all that noise, sometimes you hear something better. Sometimes you feel and hear grace. It's not loud often, it's not dramatic. It's just that steady, constant rhythm, much like the spinning of the lathe. Grace reminding you that your life is not held together by your perfect decisions. Grace reminding you that God is not pacing heaven saying, well, if you hadn't messed that up, we could have really done something great. Grace reminding you that redemption is stronger than regret. I think sometimes we imagine our lives like a single wrong turn ruined the whole map. But God is better than that. He's bigger than that. He's not the God of plan B. He's the God who walks roads we thought were dead ends and still brings resurrection. Joseph said to his brothers, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." That doesn't erase the pain. It redeems it. It makes that pain worth something. And there's a difference. By the time I finished the final passes, the shape had fully revealed itself to be that wide, shallow blessing bowl I was looking for, more open than not. The pale sapwood was stretching along one side like morning light breaking over dark hills. Honestly, it turned out better than I'd originally planned, which, if I'm honest, is annoying. Because I would prefer for all my original plans to be perfect and universally admired. Unfortunately, life keeps proving otherwise. This bowl became something better because I stopped forcing it to be what I first imagined. There's probably a sermon in that as well. Actually, there's probably 12 sermons. By the time the sanding was done and the oil hits the grain, that walnut woke up the way only walnut can do. If you work with it, you know what I mean. There's that moment when it stops looking like wood and starts looking alive. The grain deepens, the contrast sharpens, the whole thing starts telling truth about what it was all along. Man, I love that moment. Because oil doesn't create the beauty. I've said it many times. It just reveals it. And grace works like that too. God's not trying to manufacture something foreign inside you. He's just restoring what was always meant to be there. So if I could turn back time, would I change anything? Honestly, some days I think yes. Some days I think I would run backward through the years with a notebook and a warning label. Don't do that. Don't trust him. Take a chance. Make the call. Stay longer. Leave sooner. I think most of us would probably do that. But if I changed everything painful, I might also erase everything that made me who I am. And I'm not sure I really want that. Not because every scar is beautiful. Some scars are ugly. Some losses still ache. Some regrets still visit uninvited. But I've learned this. God wastes nothing. No failure, no heartbreak, no detours, no delays, not even regret surrendered to him. He wastes nothing. So maybe the better question isn't what if. Maybe the better question is, what now? What do I do with the life I have now? With the years I have been given, what do I do with them? With the lessons that cost too much to ignore, because we don't live backwards, we live forward. I've come to realize that grace builds what grit sustains. This bowl will leave my shop eventually. Someone will put it on a table somewhere. They'll call it a bowl or a platter or something else. And honestly, they get to decide that. Its purpose will be revealed in its use. Maybe that's true for us too. Maybe we spend too much time trying to rename the past and not enough time faithfully shaping the present. So today, if what if has been whispering in your ear, let me remind you, you are not behind. You are not ruined. You are not disqualified by the roads already traveled. The grain is still good. The maker is still working. And there's still beauty left to reveal. If something I've said resonates with you, like and subscribe to this channel. Send a link to a friend. Thanks for taking time with me this morning, and I look forward to seeing you all again.